So, back by popular demand is Bill Swatner. Bill is one of our busiest speakers. I think you'll see the reason will become obvious as he speaks. What you don't know about soil, compost, and mulch may not hurt you, but it may kill your plants and your gardening enthusiasm. With compost and mulch, there are so many choices. Where do you even begin? That's what Bill, one of our master's gardeners, will be talking about. Bill has done more experiments on soil than most gardening enthusiasts, and he's been through 9 of 14 advanced training courses offered to the master gardeners. So I think you'll want to hear what Bill knows. Bill, take care. Take it on.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you, John, for that introduction, and thank you to the Cultivate team for inviting me to be back. Let me get this set up and see if we're ready to go. Let's see. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good deal. All right. So when I came up with the idea of dinner in a blanket, this is what my wife had in mind, but this is what I had in mind. Kind of different concepts, different ideas of the same concept, but it has to do with compost and mulch and our soil. So two basic things. One, it's just not practical to try to change a soil's texture. And I'll go into more about what that means. And in Bexar County, we have a clay-based soil. It's just not practical to try to change that. And it's not practical to try to change a soil's pH. We have a high pH, and let me start with what I mean by that. In our soil, we have various materials. It may be sulfur, aluminum, it could be magnesium or calcium. And the dominant material is going to determine if our soil is acidic or alkaline. And so in soils that have sulfur and aluminum, they're going to be considered acidic soils and they're going to have a low pH. What that means is some plants just will not grow there. Some nutrients just will not be absorbed there. In Bexar County, we have a high soil pH. It means the dominant minerals and nutrients in our soil are going to be things like magnesium and calcium. And so we are going to have an alkaline soil and we are going to have a high pH somewhere in this area here. And that means that some plants will grow here better than others. And it means some nutrients will be absorbed here and some nutrients will not be. And I'll go into more detail on that in just a minute. Let me minimize that. There you go. So let's talk about soil texture. It's just not feasible to change a soil's texture. Soil is a combination of sand, silt, and clay. What determines sand, silt, and clay are two things. One is the particle size, but also the parent material. The parent material for sand is going to be quartz and silica. For silt, and we don't have a lot of silt around here, but it's going to be feldspar and quartz. And for our clay soil, the parent material is limestone. And so it's just not practical to try to turn quartz into limestone or to turn feldspar into silica. That's just not practical. So we just have to learn there are certain things that we need to learn how to live with. We can't, it's not practical to change our texture. It's not practical to change our soil pH, but we can modify them and have them work with us rather than against us. So here are the four primary soils you're going to find in Bexar County. The red sandy clay, which is on the left, you're going to find down around the Somerset area and area south, basically 1604. The Houston black, you're going to find in basically the middle swath of Bexar County where San Antonio proper is. The Edwards Plateau is going to be 1604 and Bandera out 1604 and 281. And then there's this one little sliver of area, which is absolutely fascinating why it's even here. And it's at 37 and the Sandy Oaks Olive Orchard. And basically it's beach sand. And how that came about is a different story, but it's absolutely incredible. So there are four primary geological events that are significant in the forming of our soil. And so this map of Texas is the most current one. Texas did not always look like this, but I'm going to use this map to illustrate our soil, how we got our soil, and why compost and mulch are so important. And so here we have Texas, we have Northwest. The four significant geological or primary geological events were one is a collision, one's an erosion, the tilt, and then the big snap. So let's go back 325 million years ago. Uh, we would have been on oceanfront property. The southern part of the United States went right along here. And south of us, this would have all been water. So you woke up in the morning, the first thing you did is went to your front porch and you put your fishing pole in the line in the water and you were catching breakfast. And then later on in the day, you would go on the northwest side of the house and you would plant your crops and tend your prehistoric cattle. But that was 325 million years ago. Then about 300 million years ago, there's this huge collision of continents. We have, again, we're on the southern part of the North American continent. And we collided, or actually they collided with us. The South American continent collided with the North, or the South American plate collided with the North American plate. And there are two very significant things that came out of that that affect our soil today. One is this line became what's known as a zone of structural weakness. And that's we call it the Balcones fault line. But it's what we consider it nowadays. But the second thing what it did was it created a mountain range that went through central Texas. It is theorized that that mountain range was as high as 25, 30,000 feet, which is basically we had the Himalayas right where we are now. It was called the Ouachita Mountains. It went up through central Texas, basically up I-35 alone, and that's where that zone of structural weakness is. And it goes into Oklahoma and Arkansas, and you can still see remnants of it in Oklahoma and Arkansas today. And it connected with the Appalachian Mountains to the east. So we had this zone of structural weakness, and we have these mountains. So to give you some idea of what it looked like at its base on the west, the mountains would have been around the Castroville area, and to the east, it would have been around the Seguin area. So we had a homestead here 300 and some odd million years ago. We would be 20,000 feet in the air because of the huge mountain range. Then over the years, the millions of years, that mountain range eroded, but it left sort of like an earthen dam, and you can still see remnants of it if you look to the northwest. What we call the hill country, in a sense, is the remnants of that ancient earthen dam. So there's two things with that collision. One was a zone of structural weakness, which is going to be significant coming up, and that little earthen dam that remained after the Ouachita Mountains in this area receded or eroded. Then, about 140 million years ago, as the continents were being formed and the land masses expanded, volcanoes were just shooting gases into the air, and that increased the temperature of the atmosphere significantly, and it melted all the ice caps, it melted all the icebergs, all the ice was melted, and this area flooded. So this area became a wide open, shallow ocean, or shallow sea is the way they referred to it. So that's the third thing. And the reason this is significant is because this shallow sea had countless trillions and quadrillions of little sea creatures that died over time, and their skeletal remains mixed with the soil on the sea floor, and it started to create the soil that we have. Remember, our soil is very alkaline, and part of being alkaline has a lot of calcium, and the calcium came from all these sea critters that died, and their calcified remains mixed with the sea floor. All right, so then about 80 million years ago was the formation of the Rocky Mountains. And what the Rocky Mountains did in their formation was they picked up the west side of Texas, and they caused Texas to tilt from the northwest, what is now the northwest, to the southeast. And what happened was all that water from the shallow sea rushed to the southeast. Some of it got caught on that earthen dam that I mentioned earlier. I said is significant. Some of that got caught in that earthen dam, and some of it spilled over and formed the coastline of Texas. So the coastline of Texas theoretically would have been part of the soil over the Edwards Plateau. All right, so then we have the Great Snap. The Great Snap. We have our zone of structure instability right here. Over the millions of years, all the soil sediment has collected here on that zone of structural instability, and we have the state of Texas tilting up, and that caused this area to snap. And when that area snapped, the Edwards Plateau rose up 1,000 feet, and the southeast part of Texas sank, which is why I have these illustrations for you. The farthest west part of Texas is 7,500 feet above sea level, and it goes down to zero on the coastline because of the tilting. All that water rushes. Some of it collects at that earthen dam. It causes it to snap. And this is the way it ends up after all these millions of years. And I love this picture because you can clearly see the outline of the Edwards Plateau. And this soil, that what used to be here is now down here. So the people in Livonia who are enjoying their incredibly rich soil, that's because it used to be over Helotes. So we have our four soils. Those are the four factors that created the conditions for the four soils that we have today. In the far northwest, we have the Edwards Plateau soil. There's not really any soil there. That is the ancient seabed that you are trying to grow your tomatoes on. Then right below that zone of structural instability, we have the Blackland prairie soil. What's fascinating is that soil has a lot of volcanic ash in it that mixed with the sea critter skeletal remains, and it formed this heavy smectite clay that is unique to this part of Bexar County. Then southeast of Bexar County, we have the red sandy clay pan soil, and then right on the tip is we have that beach sand. So we have four different soils, and the reason that is important is because depending on where you live will affect how you even begin to garden. So the big question could be, what difference does that make anyway? I mean, it's an interesting story, but so what? The so what are three primary points. One is it affects water use efficiency, it affects mineral uptake efficiency, and it affects nutrient availability to you as gardeners as you go into your yards and your landscapes to try to grow plants. So, water use efficiency. Our clay soil is horribly inefficient in the use of water. And so I'm sitting outside daring it to rain. If it rains 1 inch of rain in 1 hour, we will get something like 20 billion gallons of water in a 1 mile radius. So let me repeat that. In a 1 mile radius, Helotes is basically 1 square mile. If it rains 1 inch in 1 hour, they will receive something like 21 billion gallons of water. Because our clay soil is so inefficient at using water, we will lose 90% of that water to runoff. At the best, that soil in Helotes will absorb maybe 10% of it. So what difference does it make? It affects the way our soils can efficiently use water, and we lose a lot of water. The second question is, what difference does it make? It affects the mineral uptake efficiency. Clay particles or clay soil by nature holds on to nutrients like calcium, magnesium, and aluminum. It wants to hold on to it. And so we need to get those clay particles to loosen up a little bit, allow the plant to absorb some of those nutrients. An example would be phosphorus. If we apply phosphorus to our clay soil, in 5 years, that phosphorus will probably still be there because the soil will not allow it to go to the plants. Iron is another one. Our clay soil binds when nitrogen hits our clay, iron hits our clay soil. it binds it. It will not let it go to the plant, and we need a special iron product as whole. So what we're trying to do is trying to get our soil to loosen up the nutrients so that the plant has access to it. And then pH, our soil pH affects nutrient availability. So we're somewhere in this area over here, which means it shows you that when we apply nitrogen, the nitrogen has a hard time getting to the plants because of the soil pH. The pH binds up the nitrogen nutrients. Same thing with phosphorus. And if you look down here on iron and magnesium and boron and zinc, because we have a high pH, those nutrients are being locked in by the soil and they're not made available to the plants. So the so what on the history lesson, those are the three so whats. One is our soil is incredibly inefficient. Two, our clay soil tends to bind the nutrient particles or the mineral particles, and it just does not allow the nutrients to get to the plants as it needs to be. And that's where compost is really the answer. Um, Compost is a combination of two products and then two more things. One is browns, which are going to be things like sticks and leaves and newspaper, paper products. The decomposers on the browns are fungi. And then we mixed our compost, the browns with greens, which are going to be food scraps. In the commercial world, it's going to be manures, coffee grounds. Those are considered greens, and the decomposers for them are going to be bacteria. And so in compost, we are intentionally trying to imitate or replicate nature. In nature, things break down on their own time. Leaves fall to the ground. 5 or 6 years, they're gone. Raw food products are left out and they smell horribly, but in time they're gone. But what we're trying to do with compost is we're trying to manipulate nature. We're taking browns like leaves, and we're taking greens like coffee grounds, and we're putting them together, and we're trying to force them to decompose more rapidly. So we have browns and greens, and we have to add water, and air is needed because air helps heat up the compost pile. So what compost does is it restructures the soil. It breaks up clay so it doesn't have those claws that we used to use as kids we threw at each other. But in sand, compost does the exact opposite. It binds together those sand particles so they can hold on to nutrients and water more easily. And compost attracts minerals and attracts nutrients. And I'll go through all that a little bit more. That's a lot real quickly, but I'm going to go through a little bit at a time. This is a compost pile. Generally speaking, they are a minimum of 3 by 3, 3 foot wide, 3 foot deep, 3 foot high. And we need that because we need to keep all these browns and greens together. If they're spread over a period of time, they're just not going to get the heat they need. So we have them together. The maximum is 5 by 5, 5 feet wide, deep, and high because I'm 6 foot tall, and a 5 foot one means it's going to go up to my neck, and that's a little too high. This a 3 by 3 by 3 foot size compost container is very easy to put our materials in. It's easier to mix. In a perfect world, we would have three bins. We put our raw material in here, and in time it breaks down. We add it here, we move it to there, and then as it breaks down, we finally move it to its final spot. In the world of compost, when you see presentations on it, the assumption is you have all your browns, you have your leaves, mowed leaves, and your shredded newspaper, brown paper bags from the grocery store or from the places like Whataburger or Bill Miller's. They give you your food in a brown bag. And then you have your greens, so you have your coffee grounds, you have your banana peels and tomato, whatever, and then you mix them together all at one time, and that's the perfect world. But we don't live in a perfect world. Sometimes people add things as we go along, and that's okay. So let's go through browns. Browns are going to be material that are basically they were once alive, but now they're dead. So newspaper was once a live tree. It's been manipulated. It is now just a sheet of paper. We have leaves. Leaves should always be mowed because we have little microorganisms trying to chew up those leaves, and we have whole leaves that makes it very difficult, especially oak leaves, because oak leaves have a cover on them that it makes it very difficult to be broken down. A couple of years back, this lady she raked up all of her leaves in four very nice piles, and she had these bags that she put all these piles into. And I asked her if I had those leaves, and she said sure. And I brought them home, and I think it was like November, December, and it was getting darker. And I just threw them in my compost pile. And I came back in March, and they hadn't broken down at all because oak leaves have such a thick covering on them. And so what I had to do is I had to get them out of the compost pile, I had to mow over them and put them back in. They break down more easily. So we have our carbons, our browns. And then we add to that greens. There you see, this is my compost pile. First off, no bones, no meat, no fish. That will attract the critters that you don't want. In my piles of leaves and banana peels and coffee grounds, I've never had any animals in there. All right, so back to greens. Greens are things that are considered high in nitrogen. And this black stuff you see actually are coffee grounds from Starbucks. Some of the Starbucks places will have their coffee grounds in pail or be located someplace for you, and you can walk in and get them. Or you can walk in and say, "May I have your coffee grounds?" And there's been a couple of independent coffee places that I've been able to go into and say, "Would you mind if I had your coffee grounds?" And they gave them to me. So we mix them together. But the thing that's really critical in the whole thing is water. And I've seen people make compost piles. They have their 3 by 3 by 3, and they'll put their leaves and they'll put their banana peels in there, and then they water it. Well, the water is going to go on the outside. The water is never going to get to the middle. And so I saw a presentation I thought was absolutely brilliant. What they did was they soaked their leaves. So I have two green cans, and when I'm ready to make my compost, I will mow my leaves. I will put them about in the green cans about 3/4 of the way full, and then I will fill those two green cans full of water. And I'll let them sit for 2 to 3 days because I want those leaves totally, completely saturated, and they do weigh a ton. And then I tip them over into my compost pile, my compost bin, and I'll put in maybe 6 inches of leaves. And I use almost exclusively leaves. I have cedar elm. I'm looking around crepe myrtle, live oak, red oak, lacy oak. I'll put in about 6 inches of soaked oak leaves, and then I will put in about 6 inches of a few inches of coffee grounds. I don't need 6 inches. That's a few inches of coffee grounds, and then I'll put on another 6 inches of ground up soaking wet leaves, and then I'll put on top of that more coffee grounds, or I'll throw in some tomato leftovers or potato, whatever it might be, and that's how I make my pile. Then we need to have air in there because air is needed to help create the heat, and the heat is where the composting process breaks down. So here you see mine. These are just basically 3 pallets. And there's my pitchfork, which is if you're going to turn your pile, a pitchfork makes it a lot easier. And I can get in there and I kind of break that up a little bit to get some air in there. And so, with nothing more than coffee grounds and oak leaves, the temperature that I recorded there is a little over right at 150 degrees. That pile is just that combination of the bacteria microbes and the fungus microbes working together create the heat that is needed. And it is in this heating process that material breaks down. And this is the result, this absolutely incredible material soil amendment. It's not a fertilizer. What it does, as I said earlier, with clay soil, it breaks it up and allows it to absorb water more easily. And it makes clay soil release the nutrients more easily. And here's the effect of compost in my yard, and you can tell where I use compost and I didn't. This is St. Augustine, Raleigh St. Augustine grass in my backyard. And here is a very pale area. That area was not composted. The reason it looks like that is because I experiment on my yard all the time and I post pictures. My yard doesn't appreciate it, but I do. And here is a lot greener. That's because this area has been composted. This area has been composted. This is not composted. And so just the plants are showing you that they are struggling on the bottom because they don't have the nutrients available to them that the ones on the top do. Okay, so let's talk about rainfall. I touched on it earlier, and I want to spend a little bit more time because it's absolutely fascinating. Again, let's go back to my 1 mile radius, which is basically the town of Helotes. If Helotes receives 1 inch of rain in 1 hour this afternoon, they will receive 21 billion gallons of water. Because of the nature of our soil, they will lose 90% of that water. 19.6 billion gallons of water are going to flow down Helotes Creek, down Highway 16. If, and this is mind-blowing when I came across this, if the soil in Helotes had 5% organic material, instead of losing 90% of their water, they would absorb 90% of the water, which means instead of losing 19 billion gallons of water, they would retain 19 billion gallons of water. And I may be wrong in this, but I think I read it correctly. The San Antonio uses something like 100 billion gallons of water a year. Well, 5 rain events takes care of all of our water needs. But this is the power, that's a side note. This is the power of adding organic material, compost to our soil. If we receive 1 inch of rain today, we will receive 21 billion gallons of water. And if the entire city of San Antonio, I know we have streets and sidewalks and highways, but if the entire landscape of San Antonio had 5% organic material, the absorption rate would be 90%. And the reason I have this picture here is because we had a rain event one time, and this is my front yard. And that soil is almost, it's probably around 20% compost. And that water went down 4 inches, and that soil is only about 4 inches deep. But that's how deeply that water went down into the soil because that area is heavily composted. This area is not heavily composted. This would have lost 90% of the water. This would have retained 90% of the water. So that's the effect of compost. In composting, you're going to come across a lot of ratios, and I'll try to make some sense out of it, and hopefully I don't make it too confusing. The ratio is carbon to nitrogen. And so how much of any given material is carbon and how much of it is nitrogen? So ideally in composting, we'd like to have 30%, we'd like to have 30 parts of carbon for every 1 part of nitrogen, but that is by weight. And what that means is if you follow the people who give you presentations on composting, that means you've got to weigh all of your material, all those bags of leaves. You need to weigh them and make sure you have 30 parts of it is going to, or 70% of it is going to be carbon-based leaves, and then you have to weigh all your coffee grounds to make sure it's a certain amount. And so it's the ratios that you see are going to be by weight, basically speaking, making it as simple as possible. If you have, and I don't know, this ampersand sign should be a percentage sign. If you can get 70% of your compost pile to be leaves, I'm going to make it real simple. 70% of it leaves and 30% of it nitrogen by volume. Forget about weight, just by volume. Rule of thumb: 70%, 7 bags of huge bags of leaves and 3 little bags of coffee grounds. That is all you need to come up with a great mixture for your compost pile to break down. It can be as high as half and half, and I'll show you why in a minute. But basic rule of thumb: how do you know what your compost pile is working? If it smells, there's too much nitrogen. Those little bacteria critters, microscopic organisms, they're eating on banana peels and they're eating the coffee grounds. And what you're smelling basically is them passing gas. And so that tells you that you have too much nitrogen in there. If your pile is not breaking down, like example I gave you earlier when I picked up all the leaves from that neighbor of mine, it's just not breaking down. It's because the fungi just aren't able, they don't have the energy they need to get to break down the material. And so what we need to find is this great combination, because the fungi need material from the bacteria, and the bacteria need material from the fungi. My thing's acting up. So how do you know when your compost pile is done? If it's just if it's when the temperature is room temperature and you can put your hand on it, then you are in good shape. All right, so let me back up a minute. I talked about carbon to nitrogen ratio, and here's what I mean. Wood chips have 400 parts of carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And that means that it's going to take forever for wood chips to break down. If you look at something like manures are 15 part carbon to 1 part nitrogen. That means they're going to break down very quickly. And so the challenge in making a compost pile is, how do you balance these two numbers, the number on the left and the number on the right? And so sometimes you can have a 50% brown and a 50% green because you're using something like straw and you're using something like garden waste. Those are close enough that you can put half of one and half of the other. But so the idea of the shredded leaves, there are 60 parts of carbon and they're the 1 part nitrogen. And when I fill my coffee grounds, which is 20 to 1, that seems to be a good balance. And within a few weeks, I can have a decent compost pile. So here's the way the composting process works. When you combine the fungi on your carbon products and the bacteria on your nitrogen products, they feed off of each other and it causes the temperature to go up significantly. This is the initial phase. When you put them together, it doesn't seem like much is going on. You have a lot of water in there, you have air in there, but nothing's really happening. But you go out a couple days later, and all of a sudden the temperature is up. Let's use the right side. All of a sudden the temperature is up to 140, 158. Mine has gotten as high as 160. It's not going to catch fire. That's not an issue we have to worry about. But when it reaches 140 to 158 degree temperatures, all of a sudden that material is breaking down. The wood is breaking down. The leaves are breaking down. The banana peels are breaking down and they're starting to mix together and they're going to create that great material that we're going to add to our soil. And so the way the compost pile works is you put it in your 3 by 3 bin. You have your appropriate amount of browns and greens. You've got the water in there, and the temperature is going to go up. But over time, and it may take a couple of weeks, that temperature is going to start going down. That means it needs more air. So you get your pitchfork, you kind of toss it. If you have 2 bins, you move it to the next bin. The temperature is going to go back up again, but the temperature is not going to go as high as it did originally. It might only go up maybe to 120 degrees, but then it's going to go down again. How do you know it's reached 120 degrees? I use a compost thermometer. It's about a 2 foot long, a stem on it, and you put it into the compost pile, and it tells you the temperature of the internal temperature of the pile. If you don't have one, basic rule of thumb, give it 2 to 3 weeks and then turn it. Open it up, get the air in there, the material that's been on the inside that's cooked, that's becoming compost. We need to put it on the outside. That's where the blanket comes in the composting process. And we need that raw material on the outside. We need to get on the inside and let it go through the same process of heating and cooling. And what's going to happen is, over a period of months, and this does take time, over a period of months, this is going to flatline. And when it flatlines, that's when you know it's basically the compost is done. And so you monitor the pile. And this, again, this is my compost thermometer, and that's about 150 degrees. Red means that it's cooking. Yellow means, that's okay. Green means it's not doing much of anything. So how do you know when your compost pile is finished? It's maybe a third of the original size. So if I have that 3 foot by 3 foot, absolutely packed full of leaves and coffee grounds and some food products like bananas and apples and whatever else, it's gonna go down to maybe 3 foot down to 1 foot. And the temperature inside the pile is the same as the temperature outside the pile. The parent material is not discernible. You can't see there are oak leaves. You can't see there are sticks. You can't see banana peels. You can't see watermelon rinds. You can't see any of that. It has all been broken down by the microbes. And it has a really fine texture to it, as I showed you in that one picture. And one thing that I've found in my compost pile, because my compost piles are on the ground, I don't elevate mine. When mine are on the ground and I start digging around in there, I find earthworms. And people ask me, can I put worms at the into the compost pile? And the answer is no. It's 160 degrees. Those little suckers are going to cook. But when your pile is finished and you dig into it and you find earthworms at the bottom, that means your compost pile is ready to be used in the yard. So compost availability, there's bagged and there's bulk. Bagged, you can buy cattle, you can buy vegetable, you can buy mixed, you can buy chicken manure based compost, which tends to be high in nitrogen. It's hot. Physically, it is hot, but also nitrogen has salts to it. It has salts in it. And if you put too much nitrogen on a plant, the salts in the compost will pull salt out of the plant, and that's why it looks like it got burned. Cotton bar compost is good for soil, but it's not good for pots because the little cotton burr, it's made to help break up soil. Mushroom, you really have to do some research on the manufacture of the mushroom. It can be high in calcium, which is the challenge for us because our soil is high in calcium and you're adding high calcium content to it. So mushroom, do some research first. Leaf mold's the easiest compost you can make. Find a corner of your yard, put a big pile of leaves there, throw some water in there, and maybe 3 or 4 years, you'll have some great compost. The bulk, it's going to be vegetable based. Some people call it restaurant material, some will call it molasses based. And then there's manure. In manure, there is two types of manure-based compost. One is animal-based and one is human-based. Human-based will say something like biosolids. It is safe. There are rumors and suggestions on the internet to the contrary, but according to the science, human manure is safe for all gardening. We don't put in our vegetables uh, primarily because of the yuck factor. It's gross to grow our tomatoes and our own stuff, but we can grow it in the cattle stuff. For some reason, that's okay. But just because of the yuck factor, human manure is great. Human manure based compost is great for your lawns, for your trees, for your ornamentals. And what's interesting, I came across this the last month or so, is these things can be your compost pile that you buy from the or you can buy either bag or bulk. You can manipulate them. So if you go to the bulk yard and you buy just molasses based or vegetable based compost, you can add more greens to that, and it will make it more desirable by vegetables who like bacteria-based compost. Or if you buy that thing from the bulk yard and you put leaves into it, over time the leaves will break down, and for because of science, the ornamentals prefer a fungal-based compost. So the idea is to research that a bacteria-based compost, which is heavy in nitrogen, is preferred by vegetables, whereas your ornamentals, your trees, or turf grass really prefer a fungal-based compost. Fungus-based compost can have ratios from 10 to 1 to 100 to 1. Ornamentals love it. Forest materials love it. It may take 3 to 6 months to come up with. A bacteria-based, which is going to be your compost pile with a lot of fruits and vegetables added to it, will have a ratio of maybe 2 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And vegetables really like that. And it may take you only 2 to 4 weeks because bacteria break down food products significantly faster than fungus can break down the wood products. So the best compost is what you can make because you know what's in it, and it can take months. The most expensive is the bag stuff. Some of that stuff is running $15 a bag. For $15, I can buy a truckload. And so I see people walk out 10 bags of compost. But that's all right. Maybe they're used for a specific reason. So the best is what you make, the most expensive is what you buy. Bagged is the most expensive, but it's convenient. You can buy a bag and let it sit in your garage for a while. Or if you want to buy bulk, put it in your truck and spread it. A thing about bagged, um, when you buy it, so where are they storing that? If it's been stored out in the sun, and it's the month of August, and that bagged compost has been sitting out in the sun in our 100-degree temperatures for 40, 60, 70 days, the integrity of that compost may be challenged. And so, if the place you're buying your bag compost has it protected under some sort of covering, that will be a better product. Um, Real quickly on mulch, there are two kinds. There are organic and there is inorganic. Organic is stuff that was once living. Inorganic is going to be things like rock. The idea of mulch is it protects the soil from wind and sun, which the wind is today and the sun will be almost any time now. It helps hold in water. It helps prevent weeds. It does not stop weeds because weeds come from the ground, from the air. It blows in. Right now, the weeds are blowing in from the southeast. Pretty soon, they'll be blowing in from the northwest. Birds, when they poop, they put seeds all over the place. Mulch helps with control and it can add color. Organic is going to be things like leaves. Inorganic is going to be things like rock. Organic tends to insulate the soil better. The rocks can compact the soil, which is what we're trying to avoid when we add mulch or when we add compost to the soil. Or the inorganic can be hot, and when it's August, it's been 100 degrees for the last 3 weeks, and we have rocks out there. We can't walk on that. Well, those rocks are hitting your tree roots also. Excuse me. Organic mulch will add carbon, which will improve your soil, whereas inorganic simply radiates heat. So here you have uh, inorganic, you have pebbles, rocks, you have sheeting, and here you have like clay rock. And so in organic, you'll have straw, wood chips, hay, grass clippings. I'm not sure about grass clippings and flower beds, but it can be used as a mulch in some areas. Here's where it protects the soil. This is my yard. The front yard had no mulch, and it was July. It was 90 degrees outside, and the temperature of the soil was 90 degrees. I walked to the backyard where it has compost soil and has mulch on top of it, and it is 80 degrees. And so the plants are going to prefer the 80 degree for their roots than the 90 degrees. And this is 6 o'clock in the evening. At noon, it would have been a lot worse. I said it holds water. This is my front yard, and this is a significant drop off. That's going to be like 5 feet in a matter of maybe 7 feet. And so that's a pretty significant drop. And so this is really just solid mulch. And I put those plants in there. Those are Blackfoot daisy. There's four nerve daisies. There's some mystic spire salvia. And that's solid mulch. I planted those in. There's no fancy dirt and everything. And this we had like a 1 or 2 inch rainfall. And if you notice that the sidewalk, there's absolutely nothing there. There's no soil, there's no compost, there's nothing because the compost in the bed and the compost in this area here, I'm sorry, the mulch held back all of that water. So that is an advantage. So if we had 5% soil with organic material and we're holding that material and we put on top of that mulch, then that means we're holding on to almost all the water that comes out of the sky. So I think I'll close with this. This area used to be super stagnant with water. This is at the bottom of the hill. My yard goes like this, and this area is at the bottom of the hill, and there's a fence there that sort of captured everything. And I didn't know what to do with it, and nothing grew there. So I dug it up and I put in expanded shale. I put in, I think, a full cubic yard of human manure-based compost. And this is what it looked like when I got down. When water hits that now, it just sucks it all up. I no longer have any drainage issues. I don't have any swamps down there. And these are all going to be salvias and other native plants. Pine bark, a while back was the flavor of the day. Everybody liked pine bark, but the key word is bark. bark does not absorb water. And so people had the beautiful pine bark put around their trees. We had a really good rain that floated down to the next person's yard. And pecan shell mulch is a beautiful mulch. The color is absolutely incredible, but it floats away because it is a shell. It does not absorb water. On mulches, the suggestion is we use double shredded mulch, because native mulch, because it is the most absorbent. All those little fibers absorb water really very well. We prefer native because as it breaks down, it feeds the plants that are from here. And the idea is that this year's mulch is next year's compost. People do like using the colored mulch. At one time, that was shredded pallets, and that's not really the best wood to use for a mulch, but people use it. The color used to be a soy based because some people wonder where the color come from. It was a soy based. In the bulk, you can buy single shredded, double shredded. The city of San Antonio will give you single shredded free if you go out to Harry Wurzbach Parkway and the Bitters Road exit. In bagged, you can buy all sorts of things. Cypress, you can buy pine bark, you can buy native, you can get colored. What one time I bought three different mulches to make an illustration of the way you can use it for color, and they were all organic. I think I had cypress, double shredded, and I had native, and I had cedar. And 3 months later, you couldn't tell the difference because the sun bleached them all out. So, and here you go. This is single shredded. See the large pieces, and this is double shredded. So that is what I have, and there are a few minutes left if I totally confused you. So
Good
what do we
job,
have?
Bill. That was great. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
You're
So we
welcome.
have several questions.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so the first question is, my daughter can't grow grass in her yard in New Braunfels. She can't figure out what kind of soil she has, but she does have fine, soft sand in some areas. Where does she begin to get the soil mixture corrected? And should she have the existing soil removed from her yard?
All right. If you want to grow turf grass, the first issue is always going to be shade. If there is any shade, you get St. Augustine because zoysia does not like shade. And they say shade resistant or tolerant. That's relative to some, I don't know what. And Bermuda, buffalo do not like shade. So that means you're going to get St. Augustine if there's any shade. Turf grass and saws did an experiment with Texas A&M a few years back in the 80s. And the best thing to do is get about 6 inches of depth of soil because the roots need to go that deeply. And so I would go to the local bulk yard and tell them, I want to grow turf grass. I'm going to plant St. Augustine. What product do you sell? Because everybody labels things differently, which I'm putting the answer this way. What product do you sell that will grow St. Augustine grass? Because some people have garden soil, some people have general soil. So you go to the bulk yard and you ask them, what product do you have? You're going to have to measure your yard, length times width times, I'd say if you can, 6 inches. That sounds insane. So you should at least shoot for 4 inches. And it's going to be a well blended clay soil with compost. Lay that flat, water it in, and then get your turf grass and start laying it in. So that's the best answer I can give you on that one.
Here's another question, Bill. How do you compost your lawn and do you core aerate and top dress?
Okay, do yes, I compost. Okay, let me back up. The best way to compost your lawn is just to mow the grass and leave it. Don't bag it. When I was a kid, my mother had to sweep the lawn. She wanted no grass on there at all. But science is telling us if we leave the grass there, it will break down and provides nitrogen, which the plants need. So the way to compost, in a sense, your front yard is to mow at the correct height. Turf St. Augustine likes to be mowed high, 3 to 4 inches. Bermuda and the other and Zoysia likes to be mowed low. Leave the grass clippings. Do I core aerate? Yes, I do. I do it by hand because I'm retired and I have a small lawn. Otherwise, you hire core aeration out. What core aeration does is it digs holes into the soil and allows water and nutrients to go more deeply. top dressing, we'll get down into that. And I top dress every year, and I use biosolid compost.
Here's another one. Do you recommend a compost tumbler, and how well do they work versus creating piles like you have?
Okay, well, the flippant answer is compost tumblers are great for mixing soil. That's just kind of a side joke. Do the tumblers work? Yes, but they're on a very small scale. Remember, if I have a 3 foot by 3 foot area, and it's in at the end of the process, it's going to be 1 foot of compost. Just think how much all you put in the tumbler, it's there's not going to be much there. So yes, they do work. They're very limited. The challenge with some of the tumblers has been getting air into it because the compost needs air to feed the microbes to increase the heat, and the tumblers restrict the amount of air in there. So they do work, but on a very, very limited basis. Um, so what was the rest of that question? Because I got my brain only remembers so much at a time.
Uh, let's see. What was the rest of it?
So
Let's
that
say is
yes,
do
the
they
tum
work, or is it better to have the three
the
by
po-
three like you
the
talked
three
about?
by three is really bigger because you have mass, and you get the air in there that you need because the microbes need air so they can kick up that temperature to break down that material. But I do have a tumbler, but I use it's great for when I make my own soil, putting peat moss or coconut coir in there with perlite, and I use it for that.
Ah. The next one is can I add shredded documents on white paper to my compost pile?
Um, yeah, you can. I wouldn't do it. Because I did exactly that. I was going to save the world through my composting efforts, so I got all the office paper that was shredded, and I put it in my compost pile. But on office paper, there is a coating that acts like a glue, and so we shred that paper. We put it in there, and we put water on it, and we have a beautiful compost pile of paper mache. And so I had to dig all that stuff out and throw in the garbage can because it really wasn't useful. And so newspaper does not have that coating. So newspaper works. The other material, it just doesn't because of the coating on that paper.
Here's another one. I have dogs and sometimes critters such as raccoon and armadillos. Are they going to be drawn to the compost pile?
It the answer, if you do it correctly, no. In compost, we do not put bones or oil-based things or fish skins or whatever because that will attract the critters. They're not attracted to banana peels and oak leaves and coffee grounds unless maybe they're a Starbucks fan. They're not going to be attracted to the compost pile. I have never, and I've been doing this for about 10 years, I have never had any issue with any animal getting into my compost pile.
Here's another one. Sometimes I aerate, but usually I just top dress with compost over the lawn. Is
And
there
that's,
some salt
go
loss
ahead.
to the, what's that?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I answered your question too soon. Go ahead. I'm
So
sorry.
it says sometimes I aerate, but usually I just top dress with compost over the lawn. Is there some loss to the atmosphere, nitrogen, for example, as the compost integrates into the soil?
If there, now that I don't know. What I can, if we're not nitrogen somehow is vaporized. I don't know that. That's outside of my area. But what I can tell you is simply putting compost on your lawn makes all the difference in the world. Core aeration is simply a bonus because you're digging holes into the soil and it allows the compost to go more deeply into the soil more quickly and allows water to go down more quickly. But I didn't aerate my yard for years because I wasn't going to hire it out. I tried one time to rent a machine, and that machine was like riding a bull. And I chased the machine down the hill. Then I had to turn it and push it up the hill. And after a couple of times, I thought that's not going to happen again. That's why I bought a little handheld thing. But if you just put compost on your turf grass, on in your vegetable garden, that is going to make all the difference in the world because that compost powder is going to get down in the soil and it's going to immediately change the structure of that clay soil. It will absorb water and it will release nutrients more efficiently.
Okay, next one is when should compost be applied to the lawn? Now when you fertilize, or does it matter?
Basically speaking, you put your compost when the weather permits. The middle of August, it's a little on the warm side. Right now, this is great weather for composting. If I would have thought about it, I would have composted yesterday because the rain's coming today.
Mhm.
But if you do
Yeah.
it in cooler temperatures, you can do it in the spring, you can do it in the fall. Um, and so that's really the best times to do it.
Next one, can you explain living mulch?
Living mulch is you have compost and you have mulch. And so living mulch is where they mix the two. They'll call it living mulch, they'll call it composted mulch, they'll call it a number of things, but it's a mixture of compost and mulch. It's a two for one product, and it's a great product to use in beds. It's a challenge for the lawn because you'll have compost, I mean, you'll have mulch on your lawn, but it's great for flower beds and vegetable beds. Absolutely.
Okay, here's another one. What if there's crushed white stones on the ground? Can you build a garden bed above that or remove the rocks?
Well, if it's caliche, give it up. Um, and that's where you really need to dig down because if it's going to be a heavy rock, and that's where you get your shovel, see how far you can go down. The best thing may be just put in raised beds. Turf grass, and really 6 inches is the best. You can get by 4 inches because I do, but 6 inches. Vegetables and ornamentals, they're going to want 6 to 8 inches of soil. And caliche, you cannot add enough compost to make caliche work. It's just basically cement. So dig down as far as you can. If you can't get 4 to 6 to 8 inches of soil, then you're going to have to build up.
I have St. Augustine grass throughout my yard. Should I aerate my grass or leave it alone? In the spring, I sprinkle the yard with weed and feed. In the fall, I sprinkle bagged chicken compost. What else should I be doing?
All right, so yeah, let's go through that one time. I have St. Augustine grass. Okay, give me the first one.
St. Augustine grass throughout my yard. Should I aerate my grass? Is the first question.
Okay, yes, you can aerate, basically aerate like once every 3 to 5 years just to break the soil up. Yeah, it's a great process to go through. If you don't do it by hand, you hire somebody to do it. Yes. So the next question
The
was,
next question was, I sprinkle you weed and
okay,
feed.
yeah, weed and feed. Now is too late, and weed and feed is really kind of a separate. I'm trying to do it real quickly. The problem is weed and feed products overwhelmingly are pre-emergence, which means we need to put that down in late January, February to stop the weeds before they even emerge. The weeds are already emerging now, so the weed product isn't really working. The feeding part the is a synthetic fertilizer that the turf grass doesn't even really want to look at until maybe tax day. And so the problem with weed and feed products is timing. If you put it on in February to kill the weeds, the turf grass doesn't want the fertilizer yet. If you wait until tax day in April, the weeds were already applied. So a weed and feed product this time of year isn't good. This is March. Put down an organic fertilizer. If you want to use a traditional fertilizer, wait till tax day, pay your taxes, spread fertilizer. There's a connection there. I don't know what it is. Was there more questions on that one?
Yeah, in the fall, I sprinkle bagged chicken compost.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, another question. What exactly is biosoil compost?
Biosoil, biosolids is what they label human waste. So we flush our toilets, it goes to the south side of San Antonio, it is treated, and then it's taken as a sludge to a place like New Earth, where they mix in the landscape stuff like trees and leaves, and they mix it together, and it dries out, and it is really an excellent soil amendment. So it's biosolids means it comes from us.
Okay. What is the benefit of composting a lawn versus fertilizing?
Composting affects the soil. It breaks the soil up so that the soil can better receive the fertilizer. If you remember that one chart I had, Our soil does not absorb phosphorus and it does not absorb iron or does not to absorb nitrogen. So compost will break the soil up so that it accepts the fertilizer. And that's the primary difference. Compost works with the soil and fertilizer works with the plants.
So, Bill, we have time for one more. And if you move over grass, mow over grass and leaves each time you mow without removing them, it's just a good natural way of composting.
Yes. This time of year, I think I would rake up the first ones because you don't know what's in there. You may have some weeds coming up, but I'd put them in a compost pile. But after the first couple mowings that you put in the compost pile, I'll just leave them on the ground, let them break down. They provide new nitrogen for the soil that will in turn improve the growth of the grass.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. That was a great presentation. A lot of questions. The only question I'd like to ask you is and I know we're out of time, but I'd like to ask you a question about soil testing.
Yes,
What do you think about that?
soil testing is it's a great way to get just a base reading of what do you have. If you have a new home where the builder put something in, what did they put in? Is it so it gives you a great, I said, a great baseline. If you use compost, go back and do it in a couple of years and measure what did it look like when you first did it, and what does it look like 2 years after you've composted. So, but like I said, it's just basically it just gives it's like an EKG. It just gives you a basic reading of what you have in your soil.
Okay. Well, thank you. If you didn't get your question answered from Bill, be sure you send your question to cultivate@bearmg.org. And if you didn't have a chance to access the Master Gardener survey and from the first session, here it is again. You can use the same QR code for all sessions, and it will take only a minute or two. And if you can access the QR code, we'll be sending out. If you can't access the QR code, we'll send an email out and at the end of today's events. Our final workshop for this year's Cultivate will begin at noon. We'll be Lynn Cox will be talking about efficient watering of your landscape. And one question, have you noticed how many of our topics around not having enough water? There's a good reason for that. So thank you. We'll see you at noon.